Hi, I'm Amanda Caldell. I'm the owner of Triad Tutoring, and I wanted to get online today so that way we could walk through a sample score report so you can see all the information that you get from your SAT score report. So what I have up for you today is a sample score report that you can find on College Board. And this is what your score report will look like when you get it back from the SAT. So after you take your first SAT, you are very likely going to retake the SAT unless you manage to get a 1600 on the first go. And if you are going to retake it, then you want to take a look at your report and you want to see what were your strengths and weaknesses and where can you improve. And that way you know where to spend your time studying for the next test. So to take a look here, we get a lot of good information. You can see on this score report, the student scored the 10-10 overall. And then you can see the percentiles, which helps give you an idea of how do you stack up compared to other students. The nationally representative sample percentile means how do you compare against everybody that took the SAT nationwide. And then the SAT user percentile is how do you stack up to people that would typically take the SAT. So these would be college-bound high school students rather than just all high school students that are trying the SAT. So looking at the section scores, this gives you the breakdown between the two main categories, which is the reading and writing compared to the math. So the reading and writing was a 490, and the math score you can see was a 520. So of course you can tell that the math was a little bit of a stronger area, but again, those percentiles are really helpful. So we can see the 44th percentile compared to the 57th percentile. So this means out of every 100 people that took the test nationwide, in the reading and writing, the student did better than 44 of them. And in the math, the student did better than 57 of every 100. That's what percentile means. So looking through the test scores, now this gives us, again, some additional information. So when we look at these test scores here, now we can see how did the reading and writing break down. So if you put a 0 on the end of these scores, so 22, if you make it 220, and instead of 27, if you make it 270, that's what adds up to the 490 total. So 220 points came from the reading and 270 points came from the writing. So again, we can see the reading is an area that we need to work on more than the writing and language. The math score is just half of the section score if you take off the 0. So it really doesn't give us much more information about the math. It just kind of compares the math to the reading and writing. So again, we can see which area gave the student the most trouble. Cross-test scores help us to some degree. They don't really tend to change the way that we prep too much, but within each section, there are questions that are categorized as testing history and social studies concepts and questions that are testing science concepts. So even though you may be doing a reading passage, it may be a reading passage that's historical, and so those questions are going to fall under the cross-test score of analysis and history. Same thing for science. When you're on a reading passage, it may have a chart or a graph or something like that that you need to analyze, and those questions would be listed under the analysis and science. So those don't help us too much unless they're very far off and then you see that you have a weak area in one of those subjects. The subscores really give us probably the most information that we need. So the subscores are 1 up to 15. And this really tells us what kinds of questions within each subject gave us trouble. So these across the top here, the command of evidence, words in context, those two are specifically in the reading section. And then we look at expression of ideas and standard English conventions. Those two are in the writing section. So command of evidence, those are the ones where it'll say, what lines in the passage gave me the evidence for the answer you gave in the previous question? And those are often more challenging for students. And you can see for this particular student, that was the weakest area. Words in context is vocabulary. So those would be things like, in the context of the passage, what is the best definition for the word blank? And then you have the two subscores that are dealing with the writing questions. So expression of ideas and standard English conventions. Expression of ideas are things that ask about overall organization or writing style of the passage. So it may be things like the author was thinking of adding this sentence, should the author do so? Or the author wanted to write a passage to accomplish this purpose, did the author accomplish that purpose, right? So it's more overall writing style. Standard English conventions would be the rules of grammar, the rules of punctuation. So these would be things that would cover subject-verb agreement or pronoun agreement, punctuation like comma rules versus semicolons, those sorts of things. So you can see, again, on this student, the scores were relatively similar, so that student would really need to work on both areas pretty equally. And then we get into the math subscores. So again, these are all out of 15, and you can see that the student had the most trouble on Passport to Advanced Math. So Heart of Algebra covers Algebra 1 and pre-algebra kinds of questions. Problem solving and data analysis covers things that would involve statistics or the tables or charts. One thing to note is that these questions are only on section 4, which is the calculator section. So if you see a score that's lower in that area, sometimes it may mean that students were starting to get fatigued by the time they got to section 4. And then Passport to Advanced Math would be the Algebra 2 concepts. So if you see a lower score in this area, then it means some of those upper level questions are what was giving the student trouble. So that's the overall breakdown of the information that you get from your score report. Another really helpful place to start is logging into your account and taking a look at the questions that you actually missed. So those will show up in the College Board account if you've gotten the question answer service. And then you're able to actually look at what did you answer compared to the correct answer. And this is invaluable. So if you want to talk more about the score report or have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks again. I'm Amanda Paldau with Triad Tutoring. Thanks.